Okay, welcome back to the next module. So this is module 13, audio production, drum loops and samples. Now, in the context of actually the direct access music production workshop, we're not really diving so deep into the actual use. I'm not really showing you like how to use the loops and how samples, but it's more of an overview of some of the considerations and more of the legal and copyright aspects of using loops and samples in your productions. Okay, very quickly, all right? So we always hear the word sampling. So what exactly is the word sampling? Now, very simply put, sampling means this. It means that you are taking a part of an existing sound or a musical recording and using it in another recording or another piece of music. So you take an existing sound, you sample, for example, you sample the drums, you sample a particular instrument, then you use it in another project, or you always use it back in that same project, right? So that's basically what sampling is. Or you can be using, let's say, an existing recording from another song, right? Another piece of music. Could be an orchestral thing, could be another pop thing, another recording, and using it back in your music. So that's what sampling is. Nowadays, it plays a huge role in modern contemporary music. So especially in hip hop and of electronic, right? In EDM. Artists and producers, right, whose music were being used, okay, in the hit tracks, could claim copyright. Now, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, okay, the band The Verve, okay? So they had their hit single, Bittersweet Symphony. For obvious reasons, I can't play the sample over here in the video, otherwise, get the copyright strike. In this case, this was one of the, probably the first instance of a high-profile song. So this was a big hit. It was a major hit by the band The Verve. But it used a sample, right, just a short sample, right? Like probably just like a couple of bars loop from a track, and they only used like the string section, like a string motif. It was a song by the Rolling Stones. So this was used, it was sampled, right, as part of the song. They sued The Verve. What happened is they ended up claiming back and winning the case 100% of all the royalties and all the income from their hit song. So this is what can happen, right? So we're going to go and explore a little bit more into these kind of issues so that we'll be aware of it. Samples, whenever you use any kind of samples, okay, have to be cleared by paying a license fee and royalty payments. So not only do you have to pay your license fees to it, but any royalty that's generated by the use of that sample, you have to pay to the original license holder, copyright holder as well. Okay, so just be aware of it. So I'm going to talk very quickly about these sort of copyright infringements that can occur, right, with sampling. So very quickly, right, this will be a little bit of a slight crash course into copyright law, but the topic itself is a very long topic. It can have a whole other workshop talking about copyright law and music publishing and all that sort of thing. That one maybe we'll do a music business workshop next time lah. There are two forms of copyright related to music lah, right? Related to what we're doing here in music, there's two forms of copyright as defined by our Copyright Act 1987. You can actually go online, you can actually refer to it, or you can always go to a bookstore. You can actually buy a copy of the book and keep for yourself. I strongly recommend, if you are a musician, right, or if you are anyone who's creating content, to actually know and be aware of the copyright law and the Copyright Act. Get a copy of it. Again, you can go and download it for free lah. It's available online. You can just download as a PDF, or if you like to have it as a book, physical book, okay, you can always go to a bookstore and buy a copy of it. In related to music, correct? For our music, the copyright right exists in these two forms. So the first one, number one, is musical work, and the second one, sound recording. Actually, a lot of people are confused about this kind of copyright. It's like, I thought copyright is only one type. Copyright, there's actually many, many types. There's copyright in the musical work, and there's also copyright in the sound recording. Let's go into detail and sort of explore what these two different phrases, these two different terms mean. So musical work here, it means any musical work, and this includes the works that's composed for musical accompaniment. So that means, right, maybe it's composed for, to accompany soundtrack, maybe, for example, okay? Maybe it's meant to accompany a singer, a live performance or something like that. It's not necessarily one that's used in a song or recording of a song. So musical work here, it refers to the actual musical work. So according to our copyright law, this includes the definition would mean your melody and your lyrics. These two things, melody and the lyrics. So in this case, you cannot copyright musical work here will not include song arrangement, song structure, chord progression. You cannot copyright a chord progression. Like, I cannot say that, okay, A minor, F, G, C, I copyright that. No one else can use that already. That's ridiculous. You cannot copyright the chord progression. But you can copyright the melody and lyrics, these two things. So that's number one. Copyright exists in the musical work. I'll just add a little bit of extra information, right? Melody and lyrics in this case, right? Who does this copyright belong to? It belongs to the author, belongs to the composer, because they are the one who composed the melodies, all right? And it belongs to the lyric writer who wrote the lyrics, okay? Who composed the melody, who wrote the lyrics. So this usually goes to the songwriter and the lyricist, just so that you know. Now, number two, the second one, because it's two different things, it involves two different parties. So the second one, sound recording. So there's also copyright in the sound recording. Now, this is the definition, okay, in the Copyright Act itself, right? It's taken from there. It means it's a fixation. Fixation, the word fixation means that it's already fixed. It's like a permanently record of whatever the thing is, in this case, of course, right, a song. So it means a fixation of a sequence of sounds or representation of sounds capable of being perceived orally and being reproduced by any means. Right? So it's a long definition, the legal definition inside Copyright Act, okay? But does not include a soundtrack associated with the film, okay? Now, soundtracks is the exception. If you have a movie film soundtrack, it's actually categorized under the film itself, okay? It's categorized as that. So in other words, this means the actual master recording, right? The master recording, the tracks, the final mix, the final master. As I mentioned earlier, right? Musical work, the copyright is owned by the author, the composer, the songwriter, and lyricist. So who owns the rights? Who owns the rights to a sound recording? Sound recording, all right, the rights are owned by the label, record company, record label. So it's two different things, right? Two different forms of copyright. It's owned by different people. When I say label, all right, this basically means whoever financed and paid for it, all right? So obviously, if you are an independent artist, you are the songwriter, you are the composer, and you finance the whole project, the recording and mixing, everything, you finance it yourself, then yes, you own both. But if it's like a, traditionally in the music industry, you have the artist who is a recording artist. The one that owns the sound recording, the master recording, is the record company, not the songwriter, not the lyricist. So it's that. Now, this is a whole complicated thing. We can always have a discussion later in the Q&A if you are curious and you want to find out a little bit more. Right? Who owns the rights to this? Who owns the rights to that? Oh, who gets paid this? Who gets paid that? Okay, again, that's what I said. It's a very, very big topic. We can talk about it's like we can organize a whole different workshop just talking about this topic alone. Now, number three, and this is not defined. This is not actually defined by our Copyright Act. Okay, but there's also maybe a matter of moral rights. So moral rights is in this case, if the rights owner, right, if the songwriter, the composer, if they object to the use of it. So for example, right, I'll take a very extreme example, okay. let's say, for example, we take a song, or I take my song, for example, and then some guy uses it in their video, for example, okay? They sample it and they use it in their video, but then that video is being used to promoted by a terrorist organization, okay? So it's my moral right to object to the use, right? So it's my moral right to object to the use of that sample if it's being used in a way which I feel, is not suitable or is morally not right. Now, these kind of things, obviously, you have to contest it more. You have to actually argue and contest it in court lah. Or in a situation, right, a little bit more, not so evil, okay? Or in a situation if maybe credit was not given. Oh, I was not credited for it, right? So, you can always issue an order to YouTube or wherever the platform is, and, order them to take it down and not use it because it was not credited, for example. Okay, so there is also this matter lah. Moral rights can also apply as well. Let's move on. Okay, you have musical works, right? You have sound recordings. So when we talk about all these loops and samples, there's one more, okay, term that is very, very important to know and aware, especially nowadays with all the social media, with YouTube, everyone's putting out content, everyone's, repurposing content, for example, we use music in our backgrounds, or we talk about, or we review songs. There is this term that is what we call fair use, okay? So fair use, okay, or fair learning, okay, depends on which country's terms and all that, is a defense, okay? So here is an argument, it's a defense that will allow for, authors, creators, okay, who, right, use all this copyrighted material, right? In this case, it could be songs, it could be this music, it could be the samples from it, without having to obtain a license. Now, there are certain situations where you can use it for license, and fair use law permits the use of it. In our Malaysian Copyright Act, copyright law, yes, there is a clause which allows for it. But it can only be used for the purpose of, number one, research. Okay? If you're using it for research purposes. Number two, private study. So if you are privately, is used for your own private study purposes, right? You can use that. Criticism, if you are giving a critical report on for that, right? You are criticizing, reviewing the piece of music, right? You can use it. You can use that sample. You can use that piece of music, right, in whatever content you create. Okay. Or last of all, if it's in the reporting of news or current events. Now, but you have to make the argument that it's related, right? The song has to be related to the current event, of course, right? In that situation, you can't just simply take the song if it's got nothing to do with what you're reporting on, okay? News or current events, and then just put the music there, okay? There must be some kind of connection, So fair use is a situation where you can use all this material without having to go and obtain the license, okay? For only these purposes. Why is this important? Why is this fair use very important? Because it balances you need to have a balance, right? It balances the interests of the copyright owners. Because copyright owner needs to protect their work. If not, anybody can just use it and monetize it. So it helps to protect the work, but it also accommodates public interest to have reasonable access, So it's a balancing act between the two, okay? Between the copyright owners and public interest to have access to the work. So in this situation, if you want to do a review, you want to do a critical review, you want to do a report on a certain piece of music or song. That's why you see sometimes nowadays, especially you have the reaction videos and all that kind of stuff, that is considered usable under fair use. Again, though that can be a little bit tricky because some of the copyright, they can be a little bit aggressive nowadays, the rights holders. So very often they will do a copyright claim. So that's kind of an issue, right? Which you see a lot of YouTubers and content creators complain. It's like, hey, this is supposed to be fair use. I do a review of your song. I'm helping to promote your song, Actually, in return, I'm helping to promote. But then, the labels and YouTube will do a copyright claim against you. So this is some of the issues that you need to be aware of. Although there is the use of fair use, but it's sometimes very, very gray area, and I think at this current situation, whenever you get a copyright claim, it's very hard for you as the content creator to fight against it. Because very often, they will say, okay, submit your claim lah, right? Submit your defense. You just click and then you type in your reason, and then, okay, we will get back to you. That's all you get. You get an email notification saying, we will get back to you if the matter is resolved. And there's no one you can call, there's no one you can contact, all right? Unless you directly go and contact the label or the original publisher of the musical work that's in question lah. Okay, but that involves so much work. Don't tell me if you use that, then you need to go and call the label. If it's overseas, you need to call Universal or Sony Music, international, and actually speak to someone who's gonna layan you, and right? Nobody's gonna care about you if you are just a YouTuber or a content creator. Right, so these are some of the issues which, if you follow some of the current issues, right, involving the use of music, involving the use of samples. Right, moving on. So that is talking a little bit of the copyright laws, right, and what the sort of infringements. The fair use, again, as mentioned, it's only recognized in certain countries. Okay, in UK, I think it's not recognized. There's some countries that don't recognize it. In Malaysia, unfortunately, we do recognize it, but again, it's a gray area lah. Right, so how do you go about, right, if you are going to be using samples? So samples here could be drum loops, right? Maybe you sample and you extract a certain drum loop, right? Or it could be a vocal, it could be a vocal line or instrumental part. So the publisher, first of all, your publisher of the original work must be contacted. So publisher here will be the party that represents the composer and lyricist. That's the first party you need to contact. The performing rights organizations can help. So for example, in Malaysia, we have the MACP, which is the Music Authors Copyright Protection. Again, I'm not going to go too much detail into what the role and what MACP does lah. But you can always contact the publisher, and if you don't know how to contact it, you can always ask your local performing rights organizations. So the second one that you need to contact is the owner of the master recording. So for example, I explained earlier, copyright got two forms. You have your musical work that's covered by a publisher, and you have your sound recordings. So that is owned by the record company. So the owner of the master recordings, right, your record labels must also give their permission. So it's not just one party you have to contact. It's two parties, right? The publisher, right, and the owner of the sound recording. And obviously, once you contact them, you have to, right, pay a fee. There's usually a license fee. Sometimes you can use, there are clearance companies, there are agencies that do that. Here, I'm not sure where there are any agencies that help to do that, but I think over in US there's an agency which you can contact. Here, I think you will have to kind of deal directly with the publisher lah. Right, let's say if you want to sample a very famous hit song, right, an old hit song, local hit song, you have to, right, contact the publisher. If let's say if you contacted the publisher say, okay, right, you can, but the master recording, the record label say that cannot, right, or they will charge, or let's say for example the record company is going to charge you, okay, 100,000 ringgit, you want to sample, you can use this sample, you can use the sample recording, but we charge you a crazy amount of money to use it. Here's what you can do. You can use a sample recreation company. Actually, technically, if you can do it yourself, you can recreate that sample. So if you recreate that sample, all right, or use people who recreate all these samples, right, and some of them are really, really good because they can make it sound authentic. Now, this is one method, one technique where you can bypass having to get the permission or authorization of the record label, okay? Because you are not using the sample, you are not extracting the sample from their recording, but you are just recreating it. So you can actually do that if you want to, okay? Just so you know, but you cannot escape, right? You still the original publisher of the musical work, the songwriter, the composer, right, the lyricist. If it's involved a vocal sample, for example, that one due credit still needs to go to them, right? Whatever license fees or royalty, right, still need to. And this one you negotiate with them, okay? how you want to go about it. If you have any questions for this, right, we'll reserve it for later, okay? So in this instance, we always hear this phrase, royalty-free samples. So what are royalty-free samples? Royalty-free samples, right, they already come with a comprehensive license, okay? All you need to do usually with royalty-free samples is that some of them will be free, right? Really, really be free samples, okay? Some of them, right, you will pay only a one-time purchase, right? You want to download that sample or download sometimes even sound effects, okay, are considered, right, a sound recording, okay? It's considered as that. It's a sound recording. So sometimes you just pay a single fee, right, a one-time fee, and you can use the samples without having to, right, pay any additional royalty fee to it. So you can use it inside your song lah, right? So it can be used in any personal or commercial work, but there's usually these terms and conditions lah, all right? You cannot be reused or resold as part of a new sample library or sample pack, okay? So you go into any of your VSTs or any of your VST instruments, any of the sample library, your loop library that you use, always look inside your license terms and conditions, right? They always mention this one, all right? So you can use it in your song. You can take a loop, you can take samples, you can use it in your song, you can use it in your recordings, in your projects. But you cannot take those sample loops, right, and go and create another sample pack, sample library, and sell it again. You cannot do that. You can't reuse it. You cannot repurpose it and sell it as part of another project. You can only use it for your personal or your commercial work. Okay, cool. We clear? Understand that? Now, of course, there are, as I mentioned, right? There are some of the free user-created samples. There are some which is free samples. It can be used as long as the original creators are credited. Okay, while there are also those which have got no restrictions. So it always depends on what kind of terms and conditions, right? So some of them say, okay, you can use it, but you must credit. Some people say, oh, I don't care lah. You just use it for freely. Don't have to credit also. And also, okay, if you want to credit, it's up to you. But in generally, it's usually always nice to always credit whoever lah, whatever sampling you're using for. So, all right, this will actually be the last one. When we talk about, especially when it's very, very prevalent in a lot of hip hop and a lot of EDM, okay? They maybe what they use, they will get beats, they will get music, or maybe they want to use certain samples and all that. So there are two different terms which you have to understand whenever you are using these samples. So there are sometimes what we call leasing rights, okay? And another one that's called exclusive rights. Leasing rights, right? If you lease a sample or you lease, let's say, a beat, all right, or a piece of music, it gives the artist, it gives you as an artist, right, a certain amount of users per lease. So what this means is that, right, this producer, right, can sell the beat, right, or sample or music to multiple artists as long as nobody buys the exclusive rights to it. I think you've heard certain situations of, if you ever heard, right, where there's this local artist that did a song over this particular beat, like they rap over this particular beat. But then somebody will post and say, hey, there was this foreign artist, this Korean artist also used the same beat. Alamak, this Malaysian artist go and rip off the Korean artist, is it? No, that's not the case. That's not true. This is a situation where, in this case, right, they actually leased the beat from the producer. So this is not a case of, right, but unfortunately in social media, all these kind of things gets inflated lah. This is not a case of a local artist ripping off a foreign artist. It's not. It just so happens that the beat, right, was leased, right, to these various different artists. So they just happen to, right, rap or sing and put their own vocals, their own hook, their own melodies, and their own choruses on top of it lah. Okay, so just beware of that, right? Before lashing out and public and say, hey, this one to go and rip off this foreign artist. Check first and see, right? Maybe it's because it's leased, right? So now, the other example, right? Okay, number one, about leasing. This is, of course, it's cheaper for artists lah. So you have a very nice beat, you have a nice sample that you want to use for your song, that you want to write, that you want to create, you want to write a song on top of, but you don't have the money, you have a smaller budget, it's cheaper lah, that way, okay? So you can use that beat, you can rap, you can record your vocals on top of it, release it, your song, and that's fine, it's cheaper. But bear in mind, other artists can also use that same beat lah. Hopefully yours sounds better and becomes a hit compared to the other one lah, not the other person lah, okay? Okay, now moving on to the next one, exclusive rights. Okay, as the name implies, right? Exclusive rights will give you, the artist, sole ownership of the beat and also unlimited use. You want to use how many times for whatever one you want to release one version with one melody, it's up to you. You want to record another new version with a different singer, different artist, different melody, different chorus, different hook, it is up to you. So with exclusive rights, the producer, whoever it is who created the beat, the sample, okay, or the loop, has already given you the exclusive rights to it, right? It's up to you already, whatever you want to do with it. So they cannot sell this to anybody else, and they have to take it down. They cannot advertise and keep promoting and say, hey, this is still available, okay? Because they've already given you the exclusive rights to it. So obviously, exclusive rights, okay, is obviously going to cost more lah. And typically, right, if you are, for example, right, if you are someone that creates, makes all these beats, for example, all right, it's actually quite a lucrative business nowadays, especially for if you're an upcoming producer or music producer, right? Because there are a lot of artists out there who are looking for music, who are looking for beats, especially like in the hip hop scene. They're looking for this. They're looking for beats to use, right? They're looking for producers to produce beats so that they can record, they record on top of it. So these are two things you can need to be aware of. So you can either give them leasing rights. If you're kind of new and upcoming, usually this is what you do lah. You will want to lease lah. Only if you have a hit, right? Only if you become a little bit more established, right? Maybe you have a hit song, okay? Hit, then people know you as a hit producer. Or you can produce this kind of hit, the hottest sounding beats nowadays. Maybe then, only then you can start to sell exclusive rights. Okay, because first of all, if you are not established, you don't have a portfolio, nobody's want to pay pay you for that. You see, they'll pay you, we just want to lease it from you only. But once you're a little bit more established, you have a good portfolio, you have some hit singles, then you can probably start selling it, right, on an exclusive basis. So this is pretty much all to talk about the loops and samples. Again, this is more of an overview. We're taking a look more of the business and the implications related to the copyright, right? Copyright infringements and how to go around and go about it lah. In the instance that if you are to incorporate any kind of loops, any kind of samples, it's always good to check and pay attention, make sure that you are not infringing on anybody's rights. Make sure that you are crediting the right people, right? Make sure that credit goes to where credit is due lah, basically. Okay, that's the end of our theoretical session for this. We're going to move on to our next session right after the break.